So I went from like the victimhood of like, I can't believe this happened to me. How could she do this to me? To like, you're a piece of shit. That's why she did it to you.
Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Fat. I am your host, Big Rob. Thank you so much for downloading and tuning in. I certainly do appreciate it. Also want to say a big shout out to @GardenCityArtist on Instagram. I appreciate the coffee that you bought me at chewingthefatbr.com. It definitely helps keep these late night edit sessions rolling, and I do appreciate that. I also appreciate the guests that I have on the show, and I'm so excited to bring on today is somebody who I have been talking to for a while, and we were just trying to make it work out. Please welcome Enero Maura. You were drinking a drink and it messed me up. I was like, wait, is he not ready? I didn't want to like have you spit water out.
No. I'm good. I'm totally ready.
Enero Maura, please welcome to the show, man.
Hey, man. Thank you for having me. This is I'm happy to do this. I'm really ready to get on here and do this because there's some stuff that you normally get into that I figure is probably better actually for your show than my show, which is weird. And also, I have to get you on my show as well. So let's do this. Let's get into this.
We'll do it. Enero is a podcaster like myself. He has his own podcast called Sidepiece Season, and we'll go into what that is as well. But also, he is a nurse as well, correct?
Correct.
Tell me about Sidepiece Season.
So one of my buddies recently said that it's clickbait. Clickbait. He's like, you don't talk about side pieces at all. You don't give me any tips. You don't give me any pointers. This is pointless. You're clickbaiting me. So my focus is relationships on my podcast, and not just the standard relationships, right? There's relationships are like diets. There's a million of them out there. Like what works for you might not work for somebody else. And I want to talk about all the things that happen in relationships. So a lot of people would only get onto, somebody having a side piece or something like that. They'd only like really get into that with kind of like, aggression and hate. Like, how dare you, it's amoral. It's sacrilegious, whatever, and, it's a thing. It's something that does happen like quite a bit, really, like if you look at it. So I thought, why not? And I have had some experience in that field myself. So I thought, you know what, let's bring it all to bear in a podcast where we can talk about relationships, and hopefully the goal is to get people to be the best that they can be, like solo outside of the relationship, so that they can, so when they show up and bring that into the relationship, it's that much better. And if you're in a side piece relationship, why are you in it? Like, let's look at that, because there might be something that are you doing it because you're trying to fulfill some need that you're not getting filled elsewhere? And if that's the case, why can't you do it at home? Like, is there something internal that you need to work on? Right. Like, everybody's always like, oh, how did you do? How could you? It's like, well, why could you? Like, what's pushing you in that direction? So, the focus is, it's definitely not a how to get a side piece podcast. That is not.
Or else you would have named it that, right? You just named it how to get a side piece.
And, my mom technically was a side piece. Like it's one of those things, I was telling somebody one time, I was like, I'm the son of side piece. So like it's been in from the beginning, like since before I was born, right? I've been affiliated with it. And, obviously I also love relationships. I think that's, if you can get somebody that's really got your back and just it's nourishing and nurturing, right. Things are just better, right? Like it's nice to know that you've got somebody that has your back. Cause it's kind of, it can get cold out there in the streets.
Yeah, it can.
So it's nice to know. So I just want people to have the best relationships possible. And that involves things like setting boundaries on yourself and setting boundaries on others. And, all of these things that happen, there's people always think, I think there's a overall assumption that if somebody has a side piece, like in a marriage that their marriage is over.
Right.
But the data doesn't back that up. Like generally it will survive that one time.
Right.
And now the trust is obviously going to be an issue because the trust is like a piece of china, right? You break it, you can put it back together, but you probably won't have all the pieces back. So,
right.
It's not going to be 100% ever again.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean that you can't have something that's functional and, useful. But generally speaking, that infidelity doesn't break up. That type of sexual infidelity doesn't break up the marriage. It's a lot of not showing up in a bunch of other ways, right? Or whatever the relationship is. I mean, I'm not going to just say marriage, but people don't show up for each other. And at some point, the action of not showing up repeatedly kind of tells the person all they need to know, right? It's like, it might not happen right off the bat, but like at some point it's like, okay, the evidence of your action says that you don't really care about me.
Right.
So that's not cool with me. I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's not just the lack of, physical intimacy. It's the emotional intimacy that's missing, if you're not making that connection, if you're not meeting that person on that deep need level, that's when the problems start to arise. I know, as you're talking about, the relationships are all different now. I think it was just last week I saw that in Vogue magazine, they've got an article, is monogamy over?
Yeah, never.
But talking about that there are new relationships out there. There are people who are, venturing into thruples and things like that, to have those needs. And of course, I mean, there's been like TV shows and stuff of all us, with like, sister wives and this and that, and, right. All this other stuff. I mean, yes, there's so many different types of relationships that are out there.
I think that's the big thing is the realization that there are like the typical, thing that's promoted the most here in America is the one man, one woman, you have your 2.5 kids, all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's what's presented and promoted the most. And that's the type that I prefer. Like like the thought of having sex with two women is exciting, but to actually be in a relationship with two women, that's very that's too much action. That's too much work for me. Like personally, I'm not knocking it for the people that are, but that no, not for me, but there's people out there that it works for. Right. So I'm not poo pooing it and I'm not trying to downplay it and say that it's not good or anything. Just like people are trying to say monogamy's dead, monogamy's outdated and it doesn't work. And no, it works for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't work for everybody though. I will give you that. It's not the answer for everybody. And, taking it to the side piece thing, right? Like if you, at the beginning of the relationship, you enter the relationship as if it's going to be a monogamous relationship, but you never really talk about it. And that's not what you want. That's not what you're interested in, but you never present it and give the person the option to okay. Well, okay. So you want to have two women or two men, whatever, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You've never presented it. And now 5 years in, you're doing this on the side. Well, you never gave me a chance at the beginning to say whether I'm, if you would have told me that at the beginning, maybe I would have, well, let's try it. See how it works for me. Or I could say, oh, totally not interested. I'm not your man. Mm-hmm. And that speaks to something that I always go to in the podcast about communication, right? Like you've got to show up as yourself, honestly, and then, work from there. Because whatever you're into, it's out there.
Yeah.
Don't try and force somebody or snooker somebody into what you want to do because you didn't have the heart to just come clean and be like, hey, I'm into whatever, and I can't talk about all those other, types of relationships because I've never been in any of them. Mm-hmm. But, I have been I've been a side piece and I've had some side pieces, so I can speak to that. Right. And I can tell you I can tell you all the reasons that it happened for me, which are not by any means an exhaustive list of all the reasons why people would do it. But, I have a little bit more sympathy, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word, but I don't I don't attack the person because they're doing it. It's like, okay, there's probably a reason that you're doing this. What's the reason? Like, and moving forward from there, you know, you kind of figure it out. But if we came clean and we were honest with ourselves and kind of stopped to figure out ourselves, which not everybody does. But if you figured yourself out beforehand and then led with that, you're going to get what you're looking for.
Right. And, you know, you're robbing somebody from either time or an opportunity. If you, like you said, you go into it and you don't mention it, and you all of a sudden it's something that you just kind of sneak in on the sly on the side. Whereas if you had been upfront about it, you know, like I said, they either could have been down with it, or if they weren't, you would have known, you wouldn't have wasted their time and possible, you know, emotional, damage that may have happened later once they find out, or you get caught or whatever. You know what I mean? It may have been something that could have been avoided, by not being so scared and or selfish at the beginning.
And you definitely can't get time back, right? Like that's when it's all said and done, that's the most valuable asset that we all have, because it's finite. It's going, you never can get it back. So you owe it to that other person and to yourself, you know, like, cause a lot of people don't really do that self-reflection and get to where they understand themselves fully. Yeah. Or I don't know if you ever understand yourself fully, but you know what I'm saying? They don't do any self-reflection whatsoever. And there's things that they don't really like. I don't really plan. One of my buddies, when he was getting married, he was like, I don't intend to stop having sex with other women. And I was like, that's interesting. Like, does your fiance know that? Like, because of course she didn't, you know? And it's like, if you knew that about yourself, you should lead with that, because there's somebody out there that's totally fine with that. But you know, you don't know. And the assumption probably is that your fiance is not. And now you're going to just move forward with that. You're potentially wasting a lot of her time. And like you said, causing a lot of pain, suffering. Yeah. Which that's the other thing. Like, I think people, the more selfish you are, the more damage you invariably will cause, you know, cause that it ripples out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's like you said, that's part of it. You've got to, and this applies to pretty much anything in the world, you know, to not be selfish, to think of other people, to approach things with kindness. It's like, hey, yeah, this is something I'm into. Are you into it? I'm asking that because I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time, you know, and if you're not, that's fine. That doesn't mean that we can't still be friends or this, that, or the other. But we know that this particular type of matrimonial type of relationship just is not what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about it too, like, I think a lot of people are so afraid to just say what they want because they're literally afraid of the response, but you shouldn't be afraid. Like, what you want is what you should go after. So if you know, like, hey, this person's beautiful, I like everything about them, but I don't want to be, in a throuple, and that's what they want. If you know that at the beginning, I mean, it sucks, but you know what? This is not the only person out there that's for me. Right. There's probably 1,000 people that are a great match for me. Yeah. And this isn't this. I like most of the stuff about this person, but they have this one thing that I'm not interested in. So I got to go look for one of the other, and scratch off one. I still got 999 to go. Right.
Yeah. And and that's hard work. And maybe you're like, oh, I'm so tired of trying, the dating scene it sucks. And it's so difficult and blah, 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 blah. Okay. It's like, all right, well, are you gonna just give up on what you want and your standards and your boundaries? You're just gonna break those down because it's hard?
Yeah. One of the things, so you've heard, I'm sure, happy wife, happy life, right?
Yeah.
And just talking to a buddy of mine about that, because he is going through divorce, and he has lived his life trying to live up to the happy wife, happy life thing. And as it turns out, she just took. And and took him for granted and now is moving on. And it's like, I was like, well, so now you've learned the hard way, one valuable lesson. And that's that both people have to be happy.
Yeah.
Like this whole thought of this, because people like it's presented like it's cool to be 100% selfless in a relationship. No, because sometimes the other person is going to take you for granted, going to do some shit that you don't like. You've got to, again, boundaries, and you've set them up on yourself and on that person. Like everybody gets a boundary, right? Or everybody should have a boundary so that you can get the things you need out of life. Like that, you know, unless you're trying to be Mother Teresa or something, that whole selfless thing is like, if you will give, there's people out there that will take until you have nothing to give.
Right. And, you know, and it's not selfish to set those boundaries. It's not selfish. It's self-care. You have to, you know, at the end of the day, at the end of your life on that deathbed, it is just you and your last breath. That's it. Yes, you could be surrounded by people with love that loved you and you loved, but it's your thoughts that sit with you as you are leaving this earth. And so you have to look at that moment like, hey, did I live? Did I love? Did I enjoy those decisions I made? Or gosh, I wish I had this to do all over again.
I think when you're setting those boundaries and you're consistent, I don't think that anybody, like, people feel like, oh my God, like I'm doing this and I'm going to push people away. And that, I don't agree with that. I think that when you're consistent and you set the boundaries, then people know exactly how to interact with you. And then your interactions are always better.
Yeah.
Like not maybe perfect, but they're on the better end of the spectrum, as opposed to them not knowing anything about what you really want.
Yeah.
Not knowing anything about your own, because I mean, we're all kind of, the vast majority of humans are considerate of the people that they interact with regularly. Right. So if they know, okay, this is a hard boundary for them. Like, okay, I'm not gonna, you know, I've hung out with people that don't drink.
Yeah.
They tell me, you know, no, it's fine. You know, you can drink. Once I know that they don't drink, I don't drink in front of them. It's, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that generally the mass majority of people are going to be respectful of the person they're around's boundaries. So if you don't stand up and voice your boundaries and let it be known, they can't even begin to accommodate you. And for the people that would cross your boundaries, they are the ones that definitely need to know, because they need to know that there's going to be a consequence. And you have to actually enforce the boundary, because if you move the line, then it's not a boundary.
Yeah. You have to stand up for yourself.
Yeah.
You know,
yep.
And you were talking about that phrase, you know, happy wife, happy life. I've come to find that a much better phrase is happy spouse, happy house.
Ooh, I like that one,
because that takes care of both sides. Both sides can use that. It's not just about pleasing the one, and then I've got to be on my own to try and figure out what I'm going to do for myself. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be a team, you know, and then whether that team has 2 players or 3 or 4, you know, whatever. But you know, it's you're supposed to be able to go through this thing together. That's why you pair up. That's why you join up with these people. That's why they become, you know, your tribe, your super inner circle, you know.
I like that happy spouse, happy house. I made one up because I was trying to think of one, and mine is much worse than that. Mine is if we ain't both happy, it's going to be crappy. Well, I like yours better. Yours is a little bit more grammatically correct. But yeah, I mean, it's weird that people do so many of their people are living their relationship lives on cliches and rhymes. Yeah. This is very important. This is like a big thing. You probably need some real facts. You know, if it rhymes and it's true, that's great. But like, stop already. Right.
You're calling in from Glendale, Arizona. Is that right?
Yep. That's where I'm at right now.
So talk to me about how your job as a nurse has, you know, because I'm sure you see families and obviously individuals and things like that. And hell, you may have been present at deathbed confessions and things like that, with what you have to do. How has that job just influenced your perception of relationships?
So definitely. So I do ICU and OR. Those are my two. That's the two that I do the most. And of the two, like we deal with patients dying all the time, right? Like somebody comes in from a trauma and they get onto the OR table, they might not come off, or they might come off only to go to the ICU, the other place that I work, and be kept alive long enough for family to get in or something like that. I mean, it's, so you see, I've seen, I haven't done a lot of pediatric traumas, thankfully, because I'm not really a fan of that, but I've seen people dying, at all ages. Of course, everybody always thinks about old people, right? But like in a hospital, we're getting them, there's a 14-year-old that was skateboarding and hit their head wrong. And, I've seen from teenagers all the way up. And I know for a fact, when they do some of those emergency, when in the beginning of my OR time, we would do a lot of emergency C-sections. We don't always get there in time. So I've seen death across the age spectrum, right? From infant all the way to the elderly. And the one thing, a couple things, like humans are really strong, but yet super fragile. Like it's weird. Like every time I watch a football game, I always think like, how is nobody dead? Like they hit like, like it's so powerful. It's so violent. But we're really strong, but really frail. And like everybody has this expectation that they're going to make it to be a ripe old age. And that's just not true. Like, so taking those things into consideration with relationships, it's like, I really try not to let, like when I get mad about something, I try to like keep that all in perspective. Like, listen, does this shit matter in the grand scheme of this relationship, in the grand scheme of this person in your life? Is this shit really something that you should be mad about? And I do that just to kind of let myself let go of it, because, we hold on to these things. And then there's a lot of shit that happens that I've seen, again, from being in a hospital and just knowing a bunch of people, like where people have told themselves a story that isn't actually true. And so now all of a sudden I'm pissed off at you, Rob, for something that I made up in my mind that was not true. And I'm like, it's totally altered the course of our relationship. And, the friendship is just real because I'm thinking about some shit that's not even real. Right.
Yeah.
So I try to like focus on the important things, like, because none of the, like you said about, on your deathbed, I've never heard anybody that was on their way out being like, you know what? In high school, there was this dude and he was a jerk to me one day. Fuck him. Nobody's ever said some shit like that, right? It's like you get so in your ego and so emotional about these some trivial shit. It's like, there's big things to be, there's big issues to deal with for sure. And like, if it's not something really, really huge and significant, you need to let that shit go and move on. So that would be my takeaway from, because I mean, people, you always think, I'll do it tomorrow. Next year, I'll do it next year. When I turn 50, I'm going to go on a trip to such and such. There's a lot of that, procrastination and just, living on the assumption that you have infinite time when no matter what, you don't have infinite time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we're all guilty of that to a certain extent. You know what I mean? It's like we all think we're kind of immortal, younger people much more so than older people. I realize every time I wake up in the morning, I am not immortal, because if I did, all these gears would work the way that they're supposed to and not creak and crack and pop, but it's one of those things where you have to say, take the trip, buy the car, see the show, kiss the girl, whatever it is, if that's on your, your bucket list, things that are on the bucket list, it's like, well, that should not be a bucket list. That should just be like a regular to-do list. It's like, okay, which one of these things can I do today? Well, I want to go skydiving or something. Okay, cool. That way that's now off the list. And now you can put something else there for tomorrow.
Yeah.
And if tomorrow doesn't come, you at least will have done some cool shit,
Yeah, man. I mean, it's definitely, it's your life. Nobody else is going to do it for you. And to think that you have all of this time is a huge mistake that most of us make. And, I see this stuff all the time. But it's not like I don't always, I don't carpe diem every day,
Shout
like
out,
it's, yeah, that's right. What's up, Moj? But yeah, no, it's one of those things. Like you definitely need to, you don't know how much time you have. It's corny, super corny, but the present is a gift, right?
Yeah. No, seriously.
It's really a gift. I mean, and it's a super corny saying, and I hate that it's so corny, but it's also 100% true.
Yeah.
You don't know, like you can think all you want about tomorrow, might not make it there. And then like all that shit that happened, like everything that happened yesterday, really, you should just let that shit be in the past. Cause that's where it is. It's you have right now.
Yeah.
We're doing this. Thanks again for having me on your podcast. It's dope to see. And yeah, man, it's like, this is what we got. Like make the most of it. Yeah. Enjoy it. Yeah. That's the other thing. Enjoy it. So
right.
if things are happening that are stopping you, don't worry about, how much money you're making and all that stuff. Like you should be able to enjoy where you're at for free.
Yeah.
So if there's things that are getting in the way of that, let's figure that out. Like whether you need to get to counseling or something, or if it's just something, again, like you're living off of some things, I'm 51 years old and I spent a lot of my 20s and 30s mad about shit that happened to me when I was single digits and teens, right? My family life. Like I spent a lot of time really fucking mad about that shit. Like you're not 8 no more.
Right.
Let that shit go.
Yeah.
You're not 12 no more. Let that shit go. And some of it could have been really major. Like mine wasn't. Mine was just like when I look at all the things that are out there, it wasn't as bad as some of the things that I know some people have gone through. But I wasn't mature enough to realize that then. And I was holding on to it. And like, it was impacting things that I did, to include my relationships. Yeah. So, it's like, you're not 8 years old no more. Let that shit go.
Yeah. And that's one of those things is also, forgiveness is a big boy pants adult flex. I mean, that's major adulting when you learn forgiveness and how to give forgiveness and how to accept forgiveness too.
So I just did an episode not too long ago about forgiveness. And it's funny that you say that because like I tell people all the time that will listen, like one of the hardest things to do is to forgive. And one of the hardest people to forgive is yourself. Like, I mean, not to say that there aren't other people, I didn't have any child abuse or anything, I'm sure there are things, but for me in the way that I live my life, one of the hardest people for me to forgive was myself.
Yeah.
And once I did that, shit was great. Like, I mean, it's a definite, like, line in the sand, like before I forgave myself and after I forgave myself. And then, just anybody, because when you carry that around and you're have this grudge, I mean, sometimes you can use that to your advantage, right? Like if you played a sport and people laughed at you or whatever, and you're like, I'm going to show them, and it makes you a little bit more of a beast in your sport. It's fuel. But I mean, right. Generally speaking, if you're alone and you're mad and kind of not enjoying your life and living a vendetta against somebody that doesn't even remember you,
yeah,
or is not going to, they don't have any compassion for you. So even if they really did wrong you and they don't, you're just propagating that. And the more you think about it, your brain doesn't know the difference between it happening 8 years ago and it happening right now if you're thinking about it all the time.
Yeah.
The same chemicals get released. You're going through the same thing over again. You're making yourself like go through it and replay it and suffer it over and over again.
Yeah.
Like it's detrimental to your own health. Like they say forgiveness is, like it's freeing to the individual. That shit is real. Like I can tell you that's real. Like it's not sexy. People don't like to, we watch, we got the cowboy movies and the war movies and all that stuff where you get that person, like don't stop till they're dead or what, like, but that's, real life's not like that.
Yeah.
Real life's not like you can do a lot. You have a lot more control over your emotions, which is something that I'm always talking about on the podcast, right? Like emotional literacy, emotional intelligence, like knowing that you can do these things. Nobody ever tells you, hey, you can just forgive everybody. You don't have to and forgiveness doesn't mean like, let's get into the real topic of forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't mean everything's cool now.
Yeah.
I can forgive you and be like, hey, guess what? I don't fuck with you no more though.
Right.
Because you cross the boundaries, peace out.
Yeah, I was about to say, because that's still a boundary. It's like, hey, I've forgiven you, but I've also set up this boundary that our relationship I realized was toxic. Mm-hmm. So I've forgiven you for your part in that. I'm asking forgiveness for my part in that, but as part of this healing process, I'm having to establish a boundary, and it's a boundary I can't move because I know how bad that was. And I don't think there's nothing wrong with it. And of course, again, depending on that emotional maturity of that other person, they're going to, cuss you out, call you names, whatever, or they can accept that.
Yeah.
And that's not on you. It's not on you to make them accept it. It's just on you to be honest about it, honest about yourself, and get that out, to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about, to me, it's really all about setting yourself free and setting yourself up for success. Because all of these unresolved, I interviewed this guy not too long ago, and he said that if you don't complete it, you repeat it. And I was like, that's a dope rhyme. You living
on rhymes. So
I don't want y'all to live on rhymes if they're not real, but that one's real. Like if you don't resolve whatever problem you had in the past, it's going to play a part in everything you do moving forward.
Yeah.
It's always there, kind of like whispering in your ear, like, oh, remember that one time they did that shit to you? This is going to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Or it spreads onto other people who had nothing to do with it.
Right.
Right. It taints another relationship. It's something that happened in your childhood, and because you were done wrong, or you had this impression, or you had this failure by a person that said they cared about you, you take that and you apply it to someone else and approach that relationship with, oh, they're going to let me down too. I'm not going to put myself into it the way I should because I know they're going to let me down too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Painting everybody with the same paintbrush.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So your job as in the OR and in the ICU really fascinates me. Do you have any stories from that just come to mind that were like, you ain't got to tell people's names or whatever, but just humorous operating room stories? Because my mother was an operating room nurse.
Okay.
For 35 years. She tells some stories. Now, granted, she was a nurse at a time that was completely different from the time you are a nurse. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have all the modern technology they have now. And she tells a story about a woman's hair catching on fire from the anesthesia one time. But the oxygen came out.
Yeah.
Hair went up on a cauterizing gun. But and having to pat it out. But you got any anecdotes from the surgical gallery?
I can tell you there's a lot of crazy things that I can tell you, and but I'm going to tell you one that's just funny, and it kind of falls in line with since there is a undercurrent of sex in my podcast. I'm gonna a very minor one actually, but it's there. So we had this kid that came in. He was a young guy. He was in the Navy, and he was riding a crotch rocket, and he had a accident, broke his neck. So he had a priapism. I don't know if you know what that is. That's when you just have a spontaneous erection. Okay. So, and it's common when you have like, you know, head and neck injuries, like you can get this. So, guy's been like, I don't know his age, but you know, he's under 22, you know, young, like peak physical ability, you know, specimen.
Right.
So we had this nurse that is, I won't use her name, but she was probably in her 50s and very, very proper. So this is down in Pensacola. So this is a Southern gal, very, very proper. And she was like, you know, we were getting it. And back then I was a surgical tech. So I wasn't a nurse at that point. And so I'm setting up all my instruments and I kind of have my back turned to all of that. And the doctor came in just to hang up some x-rays and stuff. We weren't digital back then. And he's hanging on, he's saying, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. And, you know, I don't know if it's going to work or not, but we got to try. And just as he said, we got to try, she pulled off we transferred, I guess they were transferring him from the stretcher onto the OR bed, and she pulled the sheets off. And he, you know, so now you got this Greek god of a kid with this huge, I mean, he was big. He was big. And he had this huge erection. And she goes, oh, yes, we have to save him. And then, and then everybody, because it's the last person you'd expect to hear something like that from. So everybody turned around, like everybody's looking like, and, you know, said her name. And she was just, you know, you got the mask on, but you could see her whole face was like beet red, just glowing. Cause she's like, I can't believe I said that out loud. But that was pretty funny. That was a great, but like, she's just like, ta-da, like, oh my God.
We have to save him. If no one else in this room survives today, this young man needs to make it.
Oh my God.
That's awesome. Do you do a lot of traveling? Are you a traveling nurse?
Yeah. I've been on the road now for 4 years. Okay. So I was in the Panhandle of Florida for 20 years. And, the whole time I was there, I was married. Oh. So when we got divorced after 20 years. You know, it just wasn't, I just had to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was a nurse. So it's like, what better way to get the hell out of there than to go make more money and just bounce around. So the downside is that, you know, you're always moving around. You got to travel light, which I always accumulate. Like before I leave here, I have to like shred some things or shed some things, I should say, because I've accumulated a lot more. But making more money than I ever made, and I get to bounce around and just, you know, see different things. And so it's working out good. I like travel nursing. It works out. Like, I mean, obviously if I was married, this would not be as easy. Although there are people that do this, you know, that where one of the people is not a nurse or even medical, and they make it work. But, when you're a solo act, it's perfect. And then, you know, a solo act and a podcast or two, like, it's great. Yeah. So I can always talk to people and, you know, like get stuff out of them. They like it. I like it.
I was going to say, did the traveling help? Like, is that where the idea for the podcast came about? Is from the traveling, from the, you know?
Not really. So what happened was like, even when I hit the road, it still took a while for me to like process the divorce and kind of get to a good place with that. And then once I got there, I was like, man, like, what's the point of all of that? Like, what's the point of like having a relationship like blow up on me after 2 decades? You know, and I was literally asking myself that question. And then I was like, well, should I write a book? What should I do? Like, I feel like this information, I need to do something with it. And I was going a bunch of different ways with it. It wasn't like, podcast. Podcast was one of those things that kind of I thought about after the fact. I was thinking about writing a book, and, you know, it was like just a bunch of different things. And then I was like, podcast. Like, I think that could work. Like, if I could do it the right way, and talk about it. I mean, there's literally podcast about everything. So was like, why not like, a divorced dude that, has had a lot of exposure to the side piece thing and just seen a lot of relationship things occur, because obviously tons of nurses, are married. And so I'm working with a lot of women and I get to hear their side a lot. And I know some of the men's side. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to use this. I'm going to take all of this that I know and that I've been exposed to. Plus I'm always reading books and stuff about, I love like Brene Brown and John Gottman. There's a lot of things that I've read that I'm like, man, this needs to get a bigger. I shouldn't say a bigger, because I mean, I'm sure they're big in their own right, but like I'd like to transmit this to as many people as I could, this information, so that people can be, better in relationships and have better relationships, which I totally love relationships. I feel like my life was richer. It's awesome outside of one, but it was also just a little bit nicer inside of one. You don't have to have, I hate that it completes me thing. You need to be as close to complete on your own, because that's too much power to give somebody else. But man, it just was one of those things. It's just like thinking about like, okay, what's the point of all this? What's the lesson from all this? And who could benefit from hearing this? Yeah. It's like, my original idea for the podcast was, this is me talking to me at 18. That was the audience, right? They always tell you, oh, you got to niche down. Yeah. Like legitimately, my podcast was like, again, there's no time machines, but my podcast is me talking to me at 18, knowing like the kind of stupid things that I believed back then, And it's funny because looking at my demographics, when I get into the whole thing, like there's nobody in that age group. Right. But also there's plenty of people that are in my age group and that don't know the thing, that are like, oh, wow. Somebody was 40-year-old hit me up and was like, I'd never heard that before. And I'm like, damn it, you're 40. Like, I don't know. So I know that there's people out there that don't know and don't have somebody that's, interested in like, hey, let's actually get you to the place where you can be able to really rock a relationship and have a fantastic one.
All right, E, this is our second segment. This is the segment where we talk a little bit more about mental health. Everybody in the world goes through down days. Sometimes it's more depression, actually diagnosed depression. Sometimes it's anxiety. Sometimes, like I say, you just feel a little off. But everybody goes through it, and people aren't alone. But I think the conversation is important to be had because it helps people realize that. So for you, how do you keep the darkness at bay?
I love this question, by the way. One of the things that I'm a big practitioner of gratitude. Like once I went through, so the first big hurdle was for me to stop feeling like I was victimized. Like the divorce kind of caught me. I felt blindsided, but in retrospect, I was like, oh, there was precursor things that I just didn't pick up on. But overall, I felt kind of blindsided, and I kind of really, really embraced the victim mode. And that sent me into like, I wouldn't say depression. I would say despair, right? Like I just felt like, like this has never happened to anybody else. I felt like such a failure and on all these different levels. And, so once I was able to like get some distance, kind of calm down the emotions and start to think straight and realize like the things that I did and the cues that I missed, I felt really like, then I was really down on myself. So that kind of made the despair change to like, you're a piece of shit. So I went from like the victimhood of like, I can't believe it's happened to me. How could she do this to me? To like, you're a piece of shit. That's why she did it to you. Like, so once I was able to forgive myself, like everything kind of opened up. Then I was able to appreciate what I still had. And slowly but surely I got back and got stronger. But like, I was definitely, before all that, I was very, very, I didn't care if I lived or died. I wasn't suicidal. You know what? That's putting it too light. I wasn't suicidal, as in I would not have killed myself, but I did a lot of shit that could have resulted in great personal harm, maybe even up to death. I was drinking and driving like a savage. I was, I lived in the South. So I'm everywhere I go, I'm carrying a gun. Just a lot of, going to places I shouldn't be, like rough and tumble spots, things like that. I just did a lot of things that were, I'm not going to kill me, but if something happens and I die, okay. Cause I really didn't want to, I didn't want to feel that pain. So I didn't have a direct plan of something that I was going to do, but I took a lot of, I feel ashamed, particularly about the drinking and driving, because when I was doing it in the moment and all of that pain and thinking about that stuff, I never thought about the ramifications, right? I could have hit somebody else and killed, I could have killed somebody, an innocent bystander, didn't have shit to do with my dumb shit and my inability to process the situation. So that really got hammered home one night. I was at a party and a friend got drunk and they're like, "Oh, take her home," and I'm like, and I drove her home. And then the next day, I was drunk. I was not as drunk as she was because she was damn near passed out. But I was thinking, I wasn't much better than her. And she could have, the safest thing for her to do would have just been sleep there and wake up and drive herself home in the morning. But I took her life into my hands. And that made me say, okay, you got to stop this shit. You're just wallowing in this. You got to get through this. And the only way through it is through it. So, processed a lot of things, had to forgive myself. And then that just kind of set me on the thing where I was analyzing things differently and really trying to be grateful for, then I was able to appreciate all the things, cause I put so many people at risk, their health and well-being at risk. And I really felt ashamed about that. And I was like, you know what, this is not the gig. This is not your mission. This is not what you came to the earth to do. Help people be better, get your shit together and be better. And so for me, I think gratitude is a big thing. Being appreciative of what you have and really just knowing that this shit is a gift. If you're here, if you woke up, whatever your ailment is, cause we're all getting older, right? You get the aches and pains for no reason, but you're here, it's fucking dope. It's you were here, you woke up again, hell yeah. Where's the cake? Let's do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's how I keep it at bay, man. I focus on the positivity. And that's one of the things from the standpoint of, the podcast has this name, Sidepiece Season. You'd expect it to be dealing with salacious stuff and negative stuff. But I only really want, of course we talk about bad things because you have to talk about negative aspects of relationships, but I'm doing it to pump the positivity. I want people to be the best version of themselves they can be and have fucking amazing relationships, and hey, if I can get you to be thankful for everything that you have, I'm for it.
All right, E, this is our third segment. It's time now for the Fast Five. Fast Five. It's time now for the Fast Five. Fast Five. Sorry, I don't have a theme song. I'm still working on it. But Fast Five is powered by Poddex. It's an app created by our friend Travis Brown.
What's up, Travis?
What up, Travis? It's great for podcasters. Always give you interview questions and icebreakers. But like I said, it's great. Get the physical decks and keep a few in your wallet, or your back pocket. When you just meet strangers on the street, just ask them a random question. See how that turns out in life, But if you go to chewinthefatbr.com/poddex, you can use the promo code CHEW, get 10% off your physical decks. All right, E, are you ready for this?
I'm ready, man. Let's go.
All right. It's just 5 random questions. Answer the first thing comes off the top of your head. No wrong answers. All right. Here we go. What makes you lose track of time?
Not anything specific. It's whenever I can get into whatever I'm doing. So if I'm hiking, and there's a lot of scenery to see, I lose track of time. If I'm reading something that's really good and intriguing to me, I lose track of time. If I'm watching videos about how to edit podcasts, I tend to lose track of time because it's not something that I'm great at. So it just, as long as I'm in it, hanging out with my nephews, like when we're doing stuff, when we go to the park and, they're doing all their crazy stuff, like as long as I'm involved in it, like I will lose track of time.
Yeah. If you're there, you're there. If you're present in it, that's what makes you lose track of time.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. Number 2. What are you superstitious about?
Superstitious about? I am not superstitious. I don't believe in ghosts or any of that stuff.
Okay.
However, I don't break any superstitious things that people say when I'm at work. So whatever it is, because I don't have them, I don't think that it's real. Like, but if they say, oh, you can't do, you can never put if this person comes in, you can't put the grounding pad on the right, but no matter what, because of this, like whatever they have, I don't ever break it.
Okay.
I think it's crap, but like, I also don't break it. It's like, you know what? I'm not going to push my luck. I think it's stupid, but I'm going to go with it.
You're respecting their boundaries.
Yes.
I think that's what it is. You're respecting their crazy superstitious boundaries. No, that's good. That's good. All right. Number 3. What did your 15-year-old self imagine you'd be doing right now?
So when I was 15, I wanted to be a priest.
Wow.
Yeah. So not that, like I'm,
I mean, but let's look into that though. I mean, you are kind of counseling folks. And speaking of relationships, I mean, there is a part of that still in you.
Well, there's a thread of helping people, like I look at my, like there is definitely a thread of helping people and service for sure. I mean, I was in the military, before all this. And so there is a vibe to that. And, but yeah, no, a priest.
Okay.
People, like I didn't have sex till I was like almost 19. Like people, I used to tell people all the time, like, no, I'm a virgin. And they were just like, you don't have to lie to us, man. If you don't want to talk about it, don't talk about it. I'm like, I'm not lying to you. And they didn't believe it. I was saving myself for the Lord.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Number 4. What's the most annoying bill you have to pay?
The most annoying bill I have to pay, probably the water and electric on my house in Florida, because I'm not in my house in Florida.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Every time you see that, that's the bill you cuss when you're like, or log on to do it or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I got it. All right. And number 5. What is the best type of cheese?
Ooh, that depends.
How fancy
I generally like a sharp cheese. I will say that. Like I generally like a sharp cheese, but and there's a lot of cheeses that I haven't had. I probably only had like 12 different cheeses in my life, and I know there's like much more than that. I don't like Swiss cheese, although that's technically a sharp cheese. So that gets thrown out. The little when I was a kid, the cheese out of the can. Remember that?
Oh,
cheese
spray cheese. Yes.
I used to kill that. Like you couldn't stop me. Now I don't like that or the melted stuff for your nachos. Like,
oh yeah.
I want real cheese. Yeah, I want real cheese.
Okay.
But I'm gonna say my two favorites, sharp cheddar and Gouda.
Okay. That's good enough for me.
Oh, wow. That was bad.
All right, E, that is our Fast Five, and that is our time. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate learning more about you and just having a chance to talk with you. It's been a while since we've had a chance to just really sit down and talk. So I really appreciate that. If folks want to keep up with you, what's the easiest way for them to find you?
Easiest thing to do is go on Instagram, and it's sidepiece_season. I have other stuff in the work, like a website and a Patreon and buy me a coffee and all that stuff that I'm supposed to be doing that I haven't done yet. So, Definitely Instagram. For now, Instagram's the spot. And I'm also on Twitter at Sidepiece Season, all one word. But I haven't really put much up there. So Instagram's your number one spot for now.
Okay.
More to come.
And of course the podcast itself. I'm sure there's a link on your Instagram to be able to find the podcast. And I will put those links in the show notes as well. And of course, you can find out more about E and all of our past guests on the website at chewingthefatbr.com. E, one more time, man. Thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate it.
Man, this was awesome. I'm glad that to get the chance to do this. And of course, I told you this back when we were in our top secret podcast building group that I was going to have you, that I was going to be on your podcast and I was going to have you on mine. So know that I'm coming for you for yours.
I will be there for you, my friend.
All right.
Thank you again for being here. And if you would like to support this podcast, please consider buying me a coffee at chewingthefatbr.com. I certainly would appreciate it. And while you're on the website, you can also check out the merch store. Got some t-shirts and journals. I think they're pretty cool, but just check them out and let me know what you think. And I look forward to the next time when we have some time to sit a spell and chew the fat.